1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Circular breathing is a fun and impressive tool for brass players. It can also be useful in certain circumstances, like if you want to sustain a single note for a long time, or if you want to be able to play a much longer phrase. I personally developed my circular breathing during COVID lockdown, and I found that with a little bit of daily practice, it was not nearly as difficult a skill to assimilate into my trumpet playing as you might believe. I do want to say that circular breathing is rarely a necessary skill, and that if you're here learning to circular breathe, instead of practicing your fundamentals like your flexibilities, scales, and articulations, I suggest that you go hit the shed and come back another time. This is not only because of the time commitment of learning to circular breathe, but also because there are elements of the technique of circular breathing that could teach you improper use of your air and embouchure if you aren't already secure in your technique on the instrument. The basic mechanic of circular breathing is storing air in our cheeks in order to force air out of our lips to sustain a sound while simultaneously taking a breath in. You'll notice that in the process of circular breathing, we've already done two things that we would normally consider to be improper trumpet technique. One, we do not want to store air in our cheeks, as this leads to an unsupportive embouchure. And secondly, we do not want to breathe in through our nose, as this is not the most efficient breath. So with that in mind, when we're practicing circular breathing, do not let these become habits in our regular trumpet playing. There are a couple of exercises we can do away from the trumpet in order to practice the basic mechanics and coordination of circular breathing. First of all, rather simply, we can blow onto the palm of our hand and then doing what we were talking about, taking air into our cheeks and forcing the air out, trying to keep a consistent air pressure through our circular breathing. This is an exercise I've practiced many times in order to assimilate all of the basic motions of circular breathing. Similarly, for a second exercise, what we can do is do the same thing, but into a glass of water with a straw. Keeping the bubbles consistent through the circular breathing tells you that you're on the right track. It's now time to start attempting to circular breathe on the trumpet itself. It'll take some time to acclimate to the back pressure that the instrument is going to give you, so be patient with this process. I suggest starting on middle G in the staff, aiming to keep a consistent tone through our circular breathing. After you can consistently circular breathe on middle G, I suggest then moving up a partial and down a partial. You'll notice that different ranges of the instrument are going to offer different levels of back pressure, which adds different challenges to our circular breathing. In the upper register, I find it harder to control the pitch, whereas in the lower register, I find it takes a greater deal of air in order to keep a consistent tone. If you've gotten to a point where you can circular breathe on single notes like this, congratulations, you can circular breathe better than many professional trumpet players. You can now try to start using it to sustain notes in longer phrases, or it can be a fun party trick. You can also attempt to play this James Morrison or trombone shorty lick. In watching both of these trumpet players circular breathe, you should notice the differences in their frequency and depth of nose breaths. You'll notice that James Morrison is taking many small nose breaths as he's circular breathing, whereas trombone shorty tends to take 2 larger nose breaths in quick succession and then continue holding his note as usual. You should experiment with different frequencies and depths of nose breaths in your circular breathing. So now that we've learned to circular breathe on single notes, it's time for the real challenge to begin, which is learning to circular breathe while moving up and down our instrument. Something that's helped me tremendously in learning to circular breathe has been incorporating it into my regular practice routines. For instance, if you're practicing scales, then you can attempt to play a single scale many times while simultaneously circular breathing. If you watch virtuosos circular breathe, like Wynton Marsalis or Sergei Nakryakov or Peter Evans, you'll notice that they're not only able to circular breathe through all ranges of their instrument, but they're also able to circular breathe while doing all kinds of different articulations, including in some cases while double tonguing. This level of coordination is not easy to achieve. I personally find it very difficult to keep a clean articulation while circular breathing, so I am currently incorporating circular breathing into my more articulation-based exercises. Coming towards the end of this video, I do briefly want to discuss the use of circular breathing and taste. Something we as musicians should be aware of is that breath and rest are not only important for us as musicians in order to be able to sustain our phrases, but are also important for listeners in order to be able to digest the music properly. I often think of rest as punctuation on our musical phrases. And you know, when you receive a long and meandering text that lacks any punctuation whatsoever, that it makes it very difficult to understand and digest the main points of the material put in front of you. For that reason, I think it's important that we pick and choose the moments with which we use these techniques, and that we sometimes allow rest to happen in order to let the phrases speak for themselves. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it's illuminated a couple of things about the mechanics of circular breathing, as well as how we can incorporate it into our daily practice and play. If you're interested in private lessons, there is a contact form on my website. There is a link in the description below. Also on my website, you can find PDFs for purchase from my previous videos on jazz improvisation. Thank you very much and happy practicing.